I'm the only one left who remembers the infinite Earths. You see, I know the truth. I remember all that happened, and I'm not going to forget. Worlds lived. Worlds died. Nothing will ever be the same. Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. The idea of a shared universe of characters who otherwise exist in their own TV show, book, movie, or in this case, comic, opens up the possibility that these otherwise separate entities will meet each other. But sometimes, it's not enough just to be a crossover. It has to be bigger than that. Something that affects an entire line of characters. It has to be an event. Sometimes it's for an anniversary. Sometimes it's just a big blockbuster meant to get them some more money. Sometimes it's to reshape the entire direction of the company. Sometimes it's to wipe the slate clean and start over. But for whatever the reason, for the last 30 plus years, event comics have become a thing, sometimes annually, or multiple times in a single year, thanks Marvel. A limited series will be produced crossing over as many characters as they can cram into it, and the regular story of an ongoing series will be interrupted to tie into the event. After all, this is something affecting their entire world in one way or another, so why not show how big this is? And with that introduction, Atop the Fourth Wall proudly presents Event Comics Month. For the next 4 weeks, we will take a look at 4 event miniseries, 2 from DC and 2 from Marvel, as voted on by Patreon sponsors last December. What was the very first event is debatable. For the purposes of my list for voting, it required its own limited series, otherwise it's just a crossover storyline and not an event, as well as tie-in issues, few though they may be in some cases. The only exception to this was Marvel's Superhero Contest of Champions from 1982, which many list as the first event comic, despite the lack of any tie-in issues. It's just the 3-issue limited series, plus 2 annuals a few years later that expanded on some stuff. I can get into more of the weird backstory from that another day. We're starting things off with Crisis on Infinite Earths because I've mentioned it several times already on the show, and it's responsible for a lot of problems that still affect DC today. And in that regard, it is the quintessential event comic, and its tagline was accurate, because nothing was ever quite the same after it. So here's a bit of backstory we have to get into here. One of the reasons for Crisis's existence was to celebrate DC's 50th anniversary. As I've talked about before during Secret Origins Month, comics can be divided into ages: Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, etc. The Golden Age characters are the very originals, the Silver Age the reinvention of those characters. It was decided that there would be a clear separation of the two in that they existed in different universes. However, they would cross over. In particular, the Justice League and the Justice Society would have an annual crossover that was usually titled something along the lines of Crisis on Earth 1, Crisis on Earth 3, etc. This brings us to writer and editor Marv Wolfman, who loved those crossovers as a kid and came up with an idea for a villain who would be a threat to all the heroes of the DC universe. Someone who would force all of the good guys in all universes, past, present, and future, to come together and face this challenge. And that villain was called the Librarian!
Don't you know the Dewey Decimal System?
The actual idea behind the villain did match the name, someone who cataloged all the heroes of Earth, all their abilities and weaknesses, and sold that information to villains. That idea would actually get revised for the revamp of the Calculator, yes, that one, in the 2000s. The problem with having the multiple Earths thing was, for newer readers at the time, a bit confusing because you have 2 guys named Superman who basically have overall the same lives, but one is an older dude with a slightly more curved S. It was decided by the 80s to finally revise DC's history into one continuity and universe to make it more streamlined and simple for readers to get into. Wolfman announced the book in 1981, but he had to research a ton of DC history to make this happen, so the book didn't end up getting published until 1985, which again was more appropriate for DC's 50th. Celebrate the long history of the company with a bold new direction that would set the stage for the next 50 years. A limited series like this was a a big deal, and its success even more so. Marv Wolfman lamented even in 1998 that the success of Crisis had inspired so many big company-wide event books among publishers, since his story was just meant to clean house and make things easier. And those events ended up causing more problems than they solved. But for now, let's just dig into Crisis on Infinite Earths and judge the book on its own merits and failings, not for all the problems it may have created later.
Welcome to Atop the fourth wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. Brodsky, you're not the smartest. Life out, you're not an artist. Anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn. Linkara, he's a man punch, wears a birdie hat. Linkara, he has a magic gun. Where'd he purchase that? Linkara, coins, robots, Amazons and trucks. Linkara, this comic sucks. Linkara.
Let's get something out of the way here. Crisis on Infinite Earths is 12 issues long and has a lot of subplots running through it because it's supposed to touch on every aspect of the DC universe. As such, there's going to be a lot I don't bring up, scenes I'm going to flat out ignore just because there isn't enough time per week, nor do you have enough of an attention span to bring up every single thing happening in it. In addition, not looking at the covers. They're all good, and the most popular trade cover is the absolutely beautiful and awe-inspiring Alex Ross cover that pretty much features everybody in the DCU. We begin with the beginning. In the beginning, there was only one, a single black infinitude. Turns out someone forgot to plug the universe in. So cold and dark for so very long that even the burning light was imperceptible. This made cooking s'mores very difficult. But the light grew, and the infinitude shuddered, and the darkness finally screamed, as much in pain as in relief. Was it good for you two? And thus the multiverse was born, an infinite amount of worlds all separated by a different vibrational frequency. Basically, everything occupies the same space, but you'd have to alter your internal vibration in order to actually shift into another universe. We cut to one of these alternate Earths that is quickly being consumed by the coconut filling of a Mounds bar. The wall of whiteness consumes everything in its path. Man, now Hollywood is trying to whitewash entire planets. Above the people screaming and fleeing in terror is this dude in a green cloak. He cries and bemoans the fact that there's nowhere these people can go and that this world is being destroyed. There's nothing he can do about it but observe the phenomenon. And as the world is finally completely enveloped by the wall of white, he vanishes, proclaiming that he has to endure this yet again, as he has hundreds now. We then cut to Earth 3, a more well-known parallel universe in the DCU because it's been featured in several stories. This is basically DC's mirror universe, where the heroes are all evil. We saw a newer version of it in Countdown, with the good guy version of the Joker. However, here there is only one hero, and in our subversion of tropes, it's the good guy of the mirror universe who has the goatee. Luthor. And yet, despite this being a world where the bad guys are in charge, they're still trying to stop the devastation caused by the wave of white. Why's that? Well, let Marvel explain it.
There is no profit to be made in the destruction of the planet. It is very bad for business.
Luthor realizes that Earth is doomed. The wall is actually composed of antimatter. On the off chance you're unfamiliar with the concept, antimatter is made of particles, or rather antiparticles, but still, where the normal charges of them are reversed, usually a negative charge. When matter and antimatter collide, they annihilate each other and release energy. Unfortunately, this probably means someone is annihilating universes because they're too cheap to buy some damn batteries. With Earth doomed, he goes to his wife and they decide there is one bit of hope. After Luthor met heroes of other universes, he began work on a prototype device to travel to those other universes. It's conveniently baby-sized, so the two are going to send their son to another reality, and that universe's unique yellow tinting will make him Luthor Man! Well, something of the sort, actually, but yeah, they tearfully send their son to Earth 1, the universe where the Justice League comes from, as their universe is destroyed, leaving only the fresh scent of pine. Unfortunately, during this time period, the Justice League satellite was abandoned, so the capsule holding the baby just settles into an empty chunk of metal in orbit. Don't you hate it when someone comes to deliver a package to your front door and then leaves it out where anyone can take it? Nearby, another satellite is a lot more active, and observing just how badly things are going in other realities. The guy in charge here is the Monitor, which might sound familiar to those of you who have seen the old Countdown reviews 400 episodes ago. In that case, there were 52 monitors, one for every parallel universe that existed in that future story. It was an interesting concept, full of mystery and intrigue when that was introduced, mainly because there was only one of him in Crisis on Infinite Earths. And that ended up being a huge letdown because all it amounted to was 52 assholes yelling, "We should do something! Should we do something?" at each other for an hour, as opposed to having just one monitor who proudly proclaimed, "I'm gonna do something! In fact, I'm gonna do a lot of things!" While he goes to retrieve the escape pod from Earth 3, he sends his agent, Harbinger, to gather to him an assemblage of heroes and villains from various parallel Earths to combat this threat. Also, there's an unintentional bit of poor layout work in these two pages. The title of the issue, The Summoning, is spread across both pages, but because of the way the page folds, they put a huge amount of space between summon and ing. In the trade, it looks fine. In the scans, it's the summon ing. Or maybe the issue is just supposed to be the summon and that ing is another satellite. Anyway, Harbinger, or Lila, which is her real name, is able to split herself into multiple bodies to get several people at once. It's kind of like the White Rabbit from 2 weeks ago, but with more clothes. And thus begins a gathering of forces that goes across time and dimensions. It's a lot, so I won't list them all for you, but as I said, it goes from the past to the future, recruiting Dawnstar from the Legion of Superheroes of the 31st century, whose New 52 version we saw in my review of The Culling, the second person to bear the name Firebrand, a woman from the 1940s, whose modern, idiotic version you might recall from Battle for Bloodhaven, and of course, Blue Beetle Ted Kord, his first appearance in the DC Universe after they bought Charlton's heroes, who of course you should all be familiar with since I did a freaking huge retrospective on the Blue Beetle last year. However, on one of the excursions to find Arian, the ancient magical lord of Atlantis, which is extra weird because I've been marathoning Stargate Atlantis and a magical ancient kind of takes on a whole new meaning for me. Some kind of shadow creature emerges and possesses her. She does indeed get Arian, but there's a more important figure to behold here in a mental institution on Earth 2. Roger Hayden, aka the supervillain known as the Psycho Pirate. Because in the Golden Age, sometimes you just go with the first name that comes to you and hope it works out. Psycho Pirate has the ability to manipulate emotions using his Medusa mask, though it's very addictive for him. As Harbinger continues to recruit people, the Monitor briefly gives her backstory, that she was found a half-dead child floating at sea, and he rescued her and raised her these last 20 years. But he also knows that Harbinger will be the one to murder him. Dude, spoilers! I'm guessing he knows that since he must have some limited ability to perceive time, since otherwise, how is he plucking out people from different time periods? The characters were all gathered in the Monitor's satellite, now also including the Earth 2 Superman, as well as several others. Oh, and this Galactus cosplayer came wandering in. Nah, that's Dr. Polaris, another villain. Anyway, after they speculate about what they're doing here, shadowy figures emerge from all the walls to attack the group. Despite all their powers, the Shadow Demons, as they are called, are barely fought back, their powers doing little but slowing them. However, a bright light cascades into the room, forcing the Shadow Demons to retreat. The Monitor formally presents himself, along with that haircut. I am the Monitor, and I have summoned you here because your universes are about to die. I have come to sell you insurance. As we enter issue 2, we see that weird things are happening in history. Back in caveman times, the character Anthro witnesses a vision of a futuristic city when he redirects a stampede of mammoths away from his tribe.
And in that distant future, that same stampede of mammoths charges through the city before disappearing again. In the present, the Joker murders an aging film producer who owned the copyright to a bunch of silent comedies, who refused to give those copyrights to him. Is that better or worse than YouTube's copyright system? You make the call! Why did he want them in particular? Worth, roughly 26 million once they underwent the new computer coloration process. The Joker works for Ted Turner? He is evil! Batman arrives and the two fight, but it's interrupted by the sudden appearance of the Flash, with pink energy billowing out of him.
Too much pink energy is dangerous.
The Flash also looks almost like he's decaying or withering away, and then does so as he yells that the world is dying all around him. Back on the Monitor satellite, we have to tie up that loose thread idea that was part of Wolfman's original idea for him. The fact that he had been appearing in other comics before this, selling weapons and information to supervillains. He explains that that was meant to test various superpowered beings to help him catalog their abilities to get them ready for this moment. The wall of antimatter is consuming world after world. At least 1,000 have fallen already, and that with every world lost, he diminishes while their enemy gets stronger. He's linked with all positive matter, and the longer this goes, the less power he'll have to stop the antimatter wave. Here's the plan. He's planted devices powerful enough to stop the antimatter wave throughout time on Earth 1 and Earth 2, basically interdimensional tuning forks. The Monitor later explains that the problem is that the multiverse was never meant to be. An event caused the single universe it was supposed to be to split up into the different worlds, and they're all weaker as a result. Like, on a physical level, it's why the antimatter wave is having such an easy time sweeping through it. After all, antimatter and positive matter should just cancel each other out, but the antimatter is actually consuming the other worlds. Although I admit I'm kind of making that part up, because otherwise it's unexplained why they're not just annihilating each other. The purpose of the tuning forks is ultimately to merge the Earths back together so that they're stronger. And the reason they're placed throughout time is so that we can celebrate DC's varied history of books even more, starting with the future in between the modern day and the Legion of Superheroes time, the time of Kamandi and the Great Disaster. And yet the Monitor didn't recruit Ray Palmer to stop it? It's almost like the Monitors were weaker and dumber when separated from one guy too. The heroes and villains gathered have been sent to safeguard the tuning forks from damage, both from the enemy responsible for all this, but also any people they might come across. Kamandi even tries to scale one, but falls, getting saved by the Superman from Earth 2. Superman? How do you... Ah, of course. You must have met my Earth 1 counterpart. Actually, in my world, you work with chicken robots and have a huge Santa Claus beard. Oh no, we're not in the right Kamandi timeline! Other places include New York in the present time, with the new Teen Titans and the Outsiders dealing with the chaos caused by the Wall of Antimatter, World War II and DC's war comic characters, the Haunted Tank, Sergeant Rock and Easy Company, and of course the best named team of war characters, the Losers. There's also a fork during the Wild West to unite DC's Western heroes, like Batlash and Jonah Hex. And yet still another fork is placed in Atlantis in Arian's time. Oh, jeez. Did the Monitor just set the tuning fork right in the middle of the city? I hope that was just a golf course or something. More shadow demons emerge and attack our heroes, though they have a little better time driving them off now. Speaking of, since Harbinger's split state has ended and they've all merged back together, the shadow demon begins influencing her, causing her to alter her emotions and make her more inclined to hate the Monitor. However, she still goes on a new mission for him, to retrieve the baby from Earth 3, who has suddenly aged a few years and is a small child now. Oh god, Harbinger, if he claims to be your lover from another dimension, just start shooting and never stop! Lila, what is it? What is wrong? Can't you bring the Luthor baby to me? Lila doesn't quite know how to answer the man who had raised her since childhood. Indeed, how can you explain the sight she now sees? I guess the baby is no longer a baby is something completely unspeakable now. Back in Atlantis, the guy in the green cloak, going by the name Pariah, shows up as per his usual deal of witnessing destruction. Except he's shown up next to the Psycho Pirate. As I said, his desire to alter emotions is addictive to him, which means I should expect the Psycho Pirate to be crawling around a bathroom floor trying to snort emotions, I guess. So when he sees Pariah weeping and sorrowful, he uses his power to make him laughing and gleeful. Arian starts to fight him when he wants to start feeding on more emotions, but then suddenly an energy beam surrounds the psycho-pirate and teleports him away. He's brought into a dark void by the enemy responsible for the antimatter wall, promising him an entire world's emotions to play with if he serves him. If he doesn't, well, this enemy can make his face disappear.
Ooh, faced!
I should note I'm actually jumping around a little bit for the first few issues. Again, the problem with this being such a big story is that it requires summarizing a lot if you want me to try to get this video out on Monday on time. And since there are so many scenes and so many characters, there's only so much I can get into in any finer detail. Hell, look at how long I've been going so far and talking about some of the major players of the story. Speaking of, the child, who we'll now refer to by his name, Alexander Luthor. As his intelligence begins to grow along with his rapid aging, the Monitor analyzes him and discovers that he's an anomaly. Both matter and antimatter exist within him without problem. One of the weird things about the antimatter wall is that it seems to affect all of time simultaneously. For instance, the Barry Allen Flash is in the future because of events in his own book, but the wall of antimatter is there while it's also in the then-present day in New York. He vibrates to try to send a message back in time to get help, once again appearing to Batman, but something goes wrong, probably a result of the antimatter wall, and he's pulled elsewhere. Also in deep space, Superman villain Brainiac is observing the antimatter sweeping through space and decides that he needs the help from Earth to combat it. As we reach issue 4, we have a new question to ponder. How fast is the antimatter wall actually going? I mean, it's gotta move pretty fast to be going through space to annihilate entire universes, yet on Earth in the present day, Supergirl and Batgirl meet up in Gotham at night, despite us earlier seeing the wall going through New York during the afternoon.
Space is warped and time is bendable.
Speaking of Supergirl, this gives us a chance to really show the human factor of the story, as Barbara Gordon contemplates how useless she feels without powers compared to Supergirl. That the antimatter wall is so huge and terrifying, and how, well, this really does feel like the end of the world. Mind you, the emotion of the scene is kind of hampered by Supergirl wearing that 80s headband, but hey, they're trying. Pariah arrives on a world created specifically for this story, where a group of nuclear-powered superhumans rule this world and protect it. They try to attack him, blaming him for the antimatter wall, but he's completely invulnerable to harm. And the wall finishes eating up the world, but Pariah figures out that he can take someone with him when he teleports out, so he grabs the queen of this Earth, a woman by the name of Lady Quark. Lady Quark is a very important character, guys. I mean, she's one of the main survivors of this story. She's on the second to last page of the entire miniseries as part of the epilogue, and she does the important job of existing. I tried to find out why she was created, why importance was placed on her to that degree, but I couldn't find anything. Pariah at least has backstory within this situation, and his existence drives the plot, but Lady Quark? She's just angry and sad about the loss of her world, and that's it. A slightly more important character, though, is Dr. Light, an heroic version with the name to counteract bumbling villain turned icky rapist in Identity Crisis. The Monitor creates her for some reason, but hey, she's more impactful in the DC universe than Lady Quark was. One thing I haven't really mentioned until now in greater detail is that the antimatter wall is doing more than just absorbing things. It's causing catastrophic weather distortions throughout the planet. The sky is turned red, volcanoes are erupting, earthquakes, fire, the whole 9 yards. Not sure why the antimatter would be doing it, but it just causes more and more chaos for an already chaotic situation. For decades, a pessimistic placards announced the world is coming to an end. Today, heralded by hail-filled crimson skies and electrical fury, the world is indeed at its end. Smoke 'em if you got 'em. Pariah is drawn to the Monitor's satellite, where he explains to him that he is the one responsible for saving his life despite his sins. Said sins left unexplained for the time being. And indeed, he's also responsible for his dimension jumping. Before he can get into why, though, the possessed Harbinger finally strikes, killing the Monitor. Everything seems lost at the end of issue 5. The Monitor is dead, Pariah doesn't know how to activate the tuning forks, and the antimatter walls seem to absorb Earths 1 and 2. But at the beginning of issue 6, the unseen enemy tells the Psycho Pirate that something is wrong. Despite the Monitor and the two worlds dying, their power hasn't been added to his own. We also learn that the enemy has the Flash, that he was the one who pulled him away during the time travel, since the Flash is the only being capable of traversing dimensions without aid. Unless, of course, you've downed enough sugar, coffee, cans of Jolt, and Monster Energy drinks so that you can see into infinity itself, in which case, yeah, you'd probably vibrate into another dimension. With the Monitor dead, Harbinger is freed from the enemy's control. She's of course distraught over what she's done, but then the Monitor appears on a monitor. Yo, dog. It's a recording he made that explains that he knew what she was being coerced to do and not to blame herself for it. It all works to their benefit, though. The tuning forks weren't ready yet, but by killing him, it's released all of his own energy into the devices to power them and activate them, saving Earth 1 and Earth 2. That being said, they're not out of the woods yet. They still were activated prematurely, so right now the two worlds are starting to merge. But not in a proper way. Instead, their dimensional vibrations will soon match, and they'll occupy the same space at the same time. And basically destroy each other. Alexander Luthor finishes his rapid aging, which apparently includes a spiffy new golden armor for himself. Honestly, it kind of makes him look like Mordred from the movie Excalibur. Anyway, he's been given instructions by the Monitor before he was killed on what to do next. Meanwhile, the enemy figures out what happened and gives the Flash over to the Psycho Pirate to play with while he keeps working, instilling great fear in him. And while everything else is already pretty bad in the grand scheme of things, it's even worse on the two Earths. Sections of them are overlapping as their vibrations come together in the overlap points. Time is screwy with people, and things from the past, present, and future are coexisting simultaneously. And yet this still makes more sense than the finale of Power Rangers Dino Charge. Realizing just how much help they're gonna need, Harbinger, Alex, and Pariah beam up all the heroes and villains of Earth 1 and 2 that they can, including people like the Caveman Anthro and Sergeant Rock for some reason. Surprisingly, this does not result in everybody openly fighting each other, but everyone calmly waiting for the three to explain what the hell's going on. At first, everyone is a bit reluctant to hear all this, especially since the first ones recruited felt the Monitor lied to them about the tuning forks, since they didn't seem to be doing anything. But after they all return to their worlds and see the sheer carnage and chaos caused by this merging, they decide to join up. So here's the plan. Including Earths 1 and 2, there are only a total of 5 universes not consumed by antimatter. Teams will be sent to those other 3 to save them, but the Monitor satellite soon ends up under attack by the enemy. Speaking of, the Flash is finally able to pull himself free of the Psycho Pirate's control and demands to know who the hell this enemy is.
Greetings, Flash. I hope the anticipation has been worth it. Call me the Monitor! And very soon, I shall be ruler over all who live!
Anti-pants to be darkened. Despite that little declaration, he is actually known as the Anti-Monitor. Here's the deal. When the universe first formed inside of what looked like a giant hand, and this is why hand sanitizer is so important, an event occurred that accidentally split it into the multiverse. One of those realities was a universe composed entirely of antimatter. Both the Monitor and the Anti-Monitor were the first life forms to arise in their respective universes. While the Monitor was peaceful and spent his time in contemplation, the Anti-Monitor arose as this almost cyborg-like monstrosity you see at the end of issue 5, obsessed with conquest and destruction. However, because of their unique abilities, they became aware of their counterpart and decided to battle. But of course, they were equally matched and just knocked each other out for billions of years. That's where Pariah comes in. He was a scientist in his universe, obsessed with knowledge and glory. There's this weird thing in DC, at least until this point, where legend has it that no one is allowed to know how the universe began, or else it would destroy it. I don't know how that works, but Pariah wanted to know the answer and proceeded to study it. And his experiments unwittingly allowed antimatter to seep into his universe, consume it entirely, and that energy made the Anti-Monitor stronger and woke him up from the battle. And that's how this whole mess started. Pariah survived thanks to his experiment, altering him to give him his own kind of danger sense.
Pariah, the Puma Man of this world.
The Monitor decided to take advantage of that, using him as a kind of advanced warning system. The Monitor would automatically teleport Pariah to any world that was about to be destroyed, allowing the Monitor to plan accordingly and hopefully stay ahead of his counterpart. Let's go back to the Anti-Monitor himself here. Later in the story, he takes on a new appearance that basically became his canonical one from then on. But I freaking love this look for him here. Just look at this guy. The glowing cosmic eyes that almost look like they're suspended in liquid. Metal-plated skin with some kind of weird brace that attaches to his jaw and nose. Hell, the nose-like features overall help give him a slightly more humanoid appearance, but only just enough to resemble it. Otherwise, there's nothing in all the cybernetic components that would imply this thing was human. The only thing that one could conceive is organic is the teeth, which are huge, but not made to appear animalistic in any ways, just oversized, almost rotting teeth. He even has a speaker attached to his lower jaw, implying that the teeth are vestigial at this point. Upon later reflection and modern art takes of him, maybe they're not teeth, but withered skin. Honestly, I think it's better if they are teeth. And as a dark counterpart to the Monitor, he even has circuitry on his forehead that resemble the Monitor's goofy hairdo. I mean, just hot damn, that is a good villain design. Admittedly, they probably changed it to the more streamlined version we see later because this is a very detailed, busy design, but it's so worth it, especially on this splash page. Anyway, while the Anti-Monitor does succeed in destroying the Monitor satellite, everyone on board survives, and they're still able to teleport the teams into the remaining 3 Earths. As such, the Anti-Monitor has a new plan. He uses his own power to enhance the Psycho-Pirates, giving him the ability to control the emotions of those on the 3 Earths, hopefully causing enough chaos in the meantime for him to finish letting the antimatter wave destroy them. So what are those 3 worlds? First, Earth 4, the world of the Charlton heroes like Captain Atom, Nightshade, and the Blue Beetle. They scared me out of my wits with this fright story that'd give goosebumps to Stephen King! Man, the first draft of Under the Dome was weird. Second up is Earth S, or Earth Shazam because we're not very subtle, where Captain Marvel and the other Marvel family members occupy. Hear me, Mary Marvel! My magic lasso can calm you, soothe you! Well, where the hell was that lasso during Countdown when Mary Marvel was using Kyle Rayner as a club to whap Donna Troy? And finally, Earth X, which may have originally intended to be Earth Swastika because it was a world where World War II was still going on decades later. Home of Uncle Sam and the Freedom Fighters. Again, you might recall me talking about them a bit during Battle for Bloodhaven. Fortunately, Psycho-Pirates' control over the worlds is lost as the 5 universes are drawn away from the antimatter waves and now join Earths 1 and 2 in all slowly merging together. We enter into issue 7, where representatives of the 5 remaining Earths, and Lady Quark, are given the backstory I explained earlier about this whole mess. With that out of the way, a team is assembled of some of the most powerful members of each world, although mostly from Earth 1, so they can launch a retaliatory strike against the Anti-Monitor. How do they get to the antimatter universe? The answer, Captain Atom, lies with the young Alexander as well as with me. I can travel to wherever danger or evil lurk, but I cannot take you with me. Just like how I couldn't take Lady Quark from her Earth. Wait. Yeah, see what I mean? Lady Quark's presence here actually creates a plot hole. Anyway, due to his nature as being both made of matter and antimatter, Alex Luthor is able to open a portal through which they can travel. Pariah, using his abilities, will then lead them straight to the Anti-Monitor. They arrive at his stronghold, and it seems the Anti-Monitor was anticipating this, and thus he explains why he recruited the Psycho-Pirate, so that when this moment came, he could use his emotion-controlling powers to take over the minds of the heroes. Except when he had the Psycho-Pirate manipulating those 3 worlds, it kinda burnt out his abilities and he'll need time to recharge. Whoops. And after a battle against the Anti-Monitor's forces, it comes down to Superman, Supergirl, and the new Dr. Light versus him. This is one of those reasons why this story is so well remembered, as Supergirl gives her heroic last stand, fighting as hard as she can to take down the Anti-Monitor and proclaiming that even in the face of certain doom, she'll never stop fighting, basically continuing the thread from her conversation with Batgirl in the earlier issue. Unfortunately, due to a brief distraction from wailing on the Anti-Monitor, he's able to finally kill her. She did not die in vain, though, wounding the Anti-Monitor enough to force his retreat and damage the equipment that was causing the 5 Earths to merge together. The heroes retreat to Earth and a massive funeral is held for the Girl of Steel. It's heartbreaking and very well done, probably the gold standard by which character death should be handled. I'm not so keen on why it happened, though. Basically, the thought process was that for Superman being the last son of Krypton, like half the planet had survived its destruction, from the bottle city of Kandor to the Phantom Zone to various other villains, a Superdog, and of course Supergirl herself. As part of the initiative to simplify the universe, it was believed that Superman should indeed be the only survivor of Krypton's destruction. The Supergirl had to go, but they wanted to give her one last hurrah before then. And all in an effort to make Superman seem less redundant.
And honestly, who needs to see multiple different versions of the same thing?
So, in for one hero dying heroically, in for two, am I right? The Anti-Monitor retreats to the world of Quard, the seat of his empire in the antimatter universe, in his new body that, again, is the one he's more known for. The bullet head body is still cool, and as I said, obviously meant to be more streamlined, but just not as cool as the original one. The 5 Earths have stopped merging, but they're still overlapping. As such, the Anti-Monitor has been in the process of constructing an antimatter cannon, thanks to a slave labor force, to just vaporize the remaining worlds and put an end to all of this. The Flash manages to escape his imprisonment, and even overcomes the Psycho Pirate's attempts to get him under control. However, he does have a use for the pirate. After beating the snot out of him, he gets him to use his powers to take control of the Anti-Monitor's goons, the Thunderers, and have them attack their boss. He then comes to the energy source of the cannon, an orb of concentrated antimatter, that begins draining his own energy. With no other choice to dismantle the cannon, he starts going faster and faster, wearing down the weapon the more he travels across it, and releasing all of the energy. He starts moving so fast that he travels in time, first to a point in the future, then back in time to the earlier scene between Batman and the Joker, until finally he seems to disintegrate entirely, but in the process, utterly destroying the cannon and saving the 5 Earths. It was a Barry Allen story that introduced the multiverse, and with his death would end it. But hey, I'm sure the Anti-Monitor will take it well.
I will absorb the antimatter energy of more than 1 million worlds. They will instantly perish. All the lives contained thereon shall die.
Yep, mass genocide is usually a pretty measured response to setbacks. He uses the energy so that he can travel through time, but we'll get to that later. Needless to say, this kind of energy disruption is so great that even the Spectre, God's spirit of vengeance, feels it. As we enter into issue 9, over the last several issues, supervillains from the 5 Earths have been transported away. Where? To Brainiac's ship. He and the Lex Luthor of Earth 1 have come up with a little scheme. The crisis seems to be over as far as they can tell. The 5 Earths have stopped merging, and they can't detect the Anti-Monitor in either universe, so as far as they're concerned, now is the time to take over all 5 Earths with their little Legion of Doom. They start invading Earths 4, S, and X while everyone else is distracted, especially with a monumental press conference at the Earth 1 United Nations to try to explain all this. The representatives of many different worlds have come here to report on what the press has been calling the crisis on infinite Earths. Ugh, fake news. This is clearly a crisis on only 5 Earths. Alexander Luthor, Lila, and Pariah are also explaining all this, but Pariah is teleported away, sensing some new danger. Brainiac addresses the UN and demands the unconditional surrender of Earths 1 and 2, or they'll destroy the 3 Earths under their control, and likely Earths 1 and 2 in the process. Over the course of issues 9 and 10, the heroes fight valiantly to reclaim the Earths from the villains, but the battle is ended quickly by the arrival of the Spectre, floating over the 5 Earths and telling them to knock it the hell off. The Anti-Monitor has traveled back to the dawn of time itself, planning to undo the creation of positive matter altogether so that only the antimatter universe will exist. The only way to save the day is for all heroes and villains to unite. And so they do, all gathering together in one spot, and joined by a new hero. Please, I'm Superboy from Earth Prime. You've got to bring me too. Oh, Superboy Prime, it's been a long time. Welcome back, you murderous sack of garbage meant to parody DC's own customers. I kid, of course. Back in 1985, Superboy Prime was just a representative of what was essentially our world, aka the real world. I recall reading once that Marv Wolfman included him because he felt it was important, given the nature of the story altering both Superman's history and a celebration of DC's long history, that a Superboy be involved in this story. Earth Prime has been destroyed, which basically means that all of us are dead right now. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. And he somehow ended up here. Even I don't know how I disappeared, but I'm here, and I'm Earth Prime's last survivor. But hey, no worries. I'm sure this Earth is really awesome. I mean, it's not like my Earth was really all that special. Using the advanced tech they have at their disposal, the group creates a method for them to time travel, but it's not just to the dawn of time they're going. That's for the heroes. No, the villains have a different task before them. After all, they still got that pesky issue of 5 overlapping realities. As such, they've traveled back in time to prevent the event that caused the multiverse to form in the first place. And they fail. The heroes, in the meantime, also fail. The Anti-Monitor expended his own energy traveling through time to get here, so he absorbs the life energy of the heroes to do his thing, preparing to destroy the positive matter universes. But then the Spectre intervenes, aided by a cadre of magic users, imbuing him with even more power. Issue 10 ends with everything around the dawn of time shattering. Man, the universe seems surprisingly fragile if it looks like a baseball can wreck it. Entering issue 11, we get a repeat of the opening of the story. Except now, instead of a multiverse, it's just one Earth. The Earth 2 Superman wakes up in his apartment and goes to work, only it soon appears he's on Earth 1. Other inconsistencies soon start to follow. No one knows anything about the zones where time had gone haywire. Both Central City and Keystone City, the homes of the Flashes of Earths 1 and 2, now exist as twin cities. And when Jay Garrick and Wally West try to use the cosmic treadmill to travel to Earth 2, they find only a void. Oh, geez. Guys, I'd love to help you with your missing universe and all, but I gotta go check on a friend and make sure he's not doing drugs. Bye! Harbinger gathers all the heroes to Titan's Tower and explains what happened, though it's pretty obvious. They succeeded in changing history and making it so the multiverse never came to be. The remaining 5 realities have all merged into one. The Justice Society and the Freedom Fighters both fought in World War II. Only one Superman came to be, and there were no other survivors of Krypton. Those heroes, like the Earth 2 Superman, who already had a counterpart, Earth 1's became the default, and they're just a cosmic leftover. Everyone who was at the battle at the dawn of time remembers, but as far as the rest of the Earth is concerned, the crisis never happened. However, things quickly go from bad to worse again. The Earth is pulled into the antimatter universe by the Anti-Monitor, bringing us to the final issue. In the regular universe, a group of heroes find Brainiac and fill him in on what happened in the crisis, saying they need his help to save the Earth, which of course has gone missing. Back in the antimatter universe, the Anti-Monitor appears as a big giant head and starts yelling at Earth over how they've continued to beat him.
I offer you my congratulations. I acknowledge your persistence. Your will to live is astonishing. Here is your participation trophy.
The world is enveloped in darkness as Harbinger gathers a small force to once again attack the Anti-Monitor. As for the rest of the heroes, well, the darkness is broken, and that darkness forms into billions of the Anti-Monitor's shadow demons, forcing everyone to combat them. But they're gonna need even more help on this one, and fortunately, Brainiac brings the heroes who found him to the one best suited for a situation like this: Darkseid.
Welcome, my friends, to Apocalypse. I am its master, Darkseid the Destroyer. Have you come for the annual Comfy Chair Conference?
Heroes start dying left and right from all this, notably Dove of the pair Hawk and Dove, the Earth 2 Huntress and Robin, and Cole, the Teen Titan I mentioned back in March of the Titans, who was created specifically to die here because Marv Wolfman felt bad about killing off other people's characters and felt someone he created should die too. Harbinger's group arrives on Quard, the time-traveling image of the Flash from before, beckoning Wally West over to a sad sight indeed: the Psycho Pirate pulling at the empty costume of the Flash and begging for help. While they engage the Anti-Monitor directly, all of the DC Universe's sorcerers use their powers to take in all the shadow demons on Earth and expel them, giving Earth a chance to recover. Unfortunately, that also puts them in a prime position to help the Anti-Monitor when the heroes finally seem to defeat him, and he absorbs all the shadow demons at once to regain his strength again. The Earth 2 Superman forces everyone else to go return to the positive matter universe with Earth, making the last stand against the Anti-Monitor. However, 2 remain to help: Superboy Prime and Alexander Luthor. Alex is especially key. Darkseid is able to access Alex using New God technology and channels energy from Apocalypse through his eyes, damaging the Anti-Monitor even further. The dude takes like 4 or 5 different fake-out deaths to the point where he's just a screaming, angry cloud saying Superman will die, until finally the Earth 2 Superman, the original Golden Age hero, I am a man, punches the Anti-Monitor. Due to some of the consequences of battle, a nearby sun will explode and kill the three, even Superboy Prime saying he's okay dying, knowing that they saved everything. Yep, I think that kid's destined to go down in history as a real hero, boy howdy. However, Alex reveals that all isn't lost. Not only does he know a place where they can go to live out in peace, but he also saved the Lois Lane of Earth 2. I knew how the universe would be reborn. I knew the consequences, and I could not let you, of all the heroes, suffer in that loss. I mean, there were several billion other people who probably deserved to live, but she kind of resembles my mom, so there you go. In the wake of all this, we see the consequences for many of those left behind. The dead, the missing, the displaced, and the reborn, as Wally West becomes the new Flash. Harbinger, Lady Quark, and Pariah decide to carry on the Monitor's cataloging work, especially since this is a whole new reality. And in the final epilogue, we cut to Arkham Asylum, which I guess in the 80s looked a hell of a lot cleaner and more well-kept than in later stories. And who is the latest resident of the asylum? The Psycho Pirate, who proclaims that he will never forget the other Earths or the Crisis. You see, I like to remember the past because those were better times than now. I mean, I'd rather live in the past than today, wouldn't you? I mean, nothing's ever certain anymore. Nothing's ever predictable like it used to be. These days, you just never know who's gonna die and who's going to live. And thus the Psycho Pirate became the Nostalgia Critic. This comic is an epic equal to no other. Crisis on Infinite Earths is a story that spans from the dawn of time to the far future. It stars everyone in the DC universe and celebrates its history while creating something new for the future. The artwork is gorgeous, from splash pages that show off the sheer scale and immensity of the situation to the small character moments scattered throughout. Its failings are few and far between, mostly stemming from the conventions of being an event comic. Minor bits of subplots and characters that are meant only to hint at something explored in a tie-in versus being part of the actual narrative. It did what it set out to do and is responsible for memorable moments and imagery that are still homaged today. For me personally, the Titans were my first real exposure to the DC universe, but it was reading Crisis on Infinite Earths that showed me just how huge it truly was, showing me characters I had never heard of but now are some of my favorites, like the Blue Beetle, so I owe it for that at least. So what was the aftermath of a book like this? Well, a bit all over the place. The goal was to streamline the DC universe, and for the most part it did, creating an established continuity of events, but also introducing some dreaded reboots. For example, Superman and Batman had been active for some time, but Wonder Woman was now just starting out, which in turn led to the issues with Donna Troy and her multiple backstories. Superman's Silver Age roots as being the first Superboy were erased, which created problems for the continuity of Legion of Superheroes. The Golden Age Hawkman and Hawkgirl were confusing as all hell when placed next to the modern era ones, and you get the idea. It felt like while they had most of the pieces in place afterwards, there were still a lot of bugs to be worked out. And oh, how they tried to work them out again and again. 2 sequels, possibly 3, to Crisis on Infinite Earths occurred. Around 10 years later with Zero Hour, which was a bit more of an indirect sequel, trying to once again revise things, and instead making it worse, while Infinite Crisis 20 years later was a direct sequel, dealing with the fallout of both then-recent events and the perception of the DC Universe and the state of superhero comics since Crisis on Infinite Earths. I do enjoy Infinite Crisis, but it is a severely flawed story despite very good attempts at making it as epic in scope. Still, despite retcons introduced in those 2 sequels, this new version of Earth lasted until the New 52 did create a full-on reboot once again. And hey, 25 years ain't bad. As for Crisis on Infinite Earths in-universe, for the longest time, only the Psycho-Pirates seemed to recall the events of the Crisis in their entirety. As the heroes settled into this new Earth, referred to by most readers as the post-Crisis Earth, they forgot both the multiverse and much of what had happened, only recalling that they fought a being called the Anti-Monitor and that Barry Allen and many others had died during that. Pariah would appear again in the event War of the Gods, but otherwise didn't really make an appearance again until the build-up to Infinite Crisis, where he would be killed and resurrected a few times by event comics. Harbinger, of course, joined up with the New Guardians and their quest to have sex to pass on their super-duper genes, but was eventually killed in the storyline reintroducing the Superman's cousin Supergirl into the post-Crisis Earth for some dumb reason. Lady Quark would go on to join the DC Space Team Legion, and other than a cameo as part of Infinite Crisis, hasn't really had much of anything else going for her. Like the others, as part of the New 52, she's made an appearance here and there, but nothing of note. The Monitor, well, we all know what happened there. Thanks, Countdown. As for the Anti-Monitor, he actually remained dead a pretty long time, 22 years, being reborn during the Green Lantern crossover Sinestro Corps War. Before he could do anything major, the New 52 happened, and he was reintroduced as part of a Justice League storyline called Darkseid War. He was given a new backstory, and a lame one at that, tying him more into the mythology of the new gods and giving him a more humanoid appearance that frankly makes him look more like a ripoff of Marvel's Apocalypse. As for the Psycho-Pirate, well, that's a long story there too. But needless to say, he didn't forget. And whew, that's it for this one. Come back next week as we flip over to Marvel and see what is considered the first real big crossover event. Just remember, nothing you dream of is impossible for him to accomplish. Somehow, at the dawn of time, we were split into an infinite number of universes. To save all life, we must return to being one universe again. And trust me, it'll stay that way when we're done with this. I mean, I'd have to be pretty crazy to split it up into a multiverse again.